The night sky over the Pacific has always carried a kind of ancient silence, an unbroken, eternal stillness that makes even the most experienced pilots feel strangely small, as if flying through a cathedral carved into the heavens. On January 21st, 2015, that silence was pierced by the steady hum of a U.S. Navy F/A-18 Super Hornet cutting through the cold evening air. Lieutenant Commander James Harper, a decorated pilot with more than 15 years of service, believed it would be another routine training flight. He had flown these skies countless times, tracing the same invisible lines in the darkness. But on this night, something beyond routine, something beyond explanation, waited for him in the empty black above the ocean. The cockpit was dimly lit, bathed in the glow of instrument panels and shifting green numerics. Harper's breath fogged faintly inside his oxygen mask, a subtle reminder that at 30,000 feet, the world outside was nothing but cold and vacuum. He steadied his grip on the throttle and glanced toward his wingmen, flying a few miles off his left side. Every movement was precise, rehearsed thousands of times, carved into muscle memory. At this altitude, mistakes were not forgiven. Harper checked in with the USS Theodore Roosevelt, stationed far below on the open waters. Air traffic control reported clear skies, routine radar contacts, nothing unusual. It was the sort of mission where boredom was more likely than adrenaline. Yet even in moments of calm, Harper had learned to remain vigilant. Experienced pilots knew that the sky could change its mood instantly, storms forming from nothing, mechanical glitches emerging without warning, or unexpected encounters with aircraft that weren't supposed to be there. Still, nothing prepared him for what would appear next. He first noticed it as a faint blip on his radar, tiny, almost indistinguishable from background clutter. It moved erratically, skipping across the screen in sharp, unnatural jumps. Harper frowned. It didn't match any known aircraft signature. He tapped the display, thinking it might be a glitch, a brief moment of static interference. But the blip remained, then shifted position in a way no plane could. Roosevelt. "This is Alpha 2-1, Harper radioed, keeping his voice steady. "I have an unidentified radar contact bearing 085. Please confirm." The response came seconds later, calm and steady. As naval controllers read their own instruments, Alpha 2-1. "We're showing a possible contact at your 12 o'clock, altitude unknown. Could be interference. Proceed with caution." Interference. It was always the first explanation, the safe explanation. But Harper's instincts tightened. There was something off about the movement, too abrupt, too intelligent, almost like a creature flicking its tail beneath the waves. He angled the Super Hornet slightly, turning toward the contact. The engines roared softly behind him. Without warning, the thing appeared not on the radar, but directly in front of his jet. At first, he thought it was a star. A bright white dot hovering against the infinite backdrop of night. But stars do not move sideways in an instant. Stars do not descend rapidly and then freeze in midair. Stars do not pace a fighter jet. The object drifted, smoothly, deliberately, without a single sound or any visible means of propulsion. Harper's heart pounded in his chest, not with fear, but with disbelief. His training told him to classify its size, shape, altitude, but nothing about this object fit into any category. He had been taught it was oval, bright, luminescent. The edges shimmered faintly, as if bending the air around it. And it moved like nothing bound by inertia or physics. "Do you see this?" He whispered into the com. But his wingman's voice was already crackling with the same shock. "Alpha 2-1. I have visual contact." "What? What is that?" Their jets thundered forward, but the object kept perfect distance, almost curious, almost watching. Harper took a slow breath. "Roosevelt, we have visual confirmation of an unidentified aerial object. It's pacing our aircraft." The carrier's radio line erupted with activity, overlapping voices and sudden urgency. It was clear, whatever this thing was, it was no longer a radar anomaly. It was real, and it was close. Harper tried to steady himself. He had been in combat zones. He had endured engine failures, emergency landings, and missile lock warnings. But this was something different. This wasn't an enemy he could predict or a threat he could counter. This was an unknown. The object accelerated dot in less than a second. It shot forward and climbed vertically at a speed that ripped through the darkness like a bolt of silent lightning. Harper jerked the stick to follow, but his instruments screamed warnings. V-forces pushing the limits of even a military-grade fighter. Impossible, he muttered. No aircraft built by any known nation could move like that. Not with that control. Not without breaking apart. For a moment, the object vanished entirely. No radar signature. No visual trace. Only the empty sky. Harper's breathing slowed. He was trained to expect threats, surprises, even the unexpected, but not the impossible. The cockpit felt smaller suddenly, as though the sky itself was closing in. Then, without warning, the object reappeared. Directly behind his wingman's jet. Brake right now. Harper barked. The two Super Hornets split, engines screaming as they peeled apart. The object followed neither. It simply remained at a fixed point in the air, completely unmoving, as if gravity did not apply to it. Harper circled around, adrenaline pounding through every vein. He needed answers. He needed to understand what he was seeing. But the sky gave none. Instead, something else happened, something that would shake him for the rest of his life. As Harper closed distance, the object emitted a faint pulsing light. Not bright, not aggressive, almost like a signal. A communication. The pulse repeated 3 times. Then the object shifted again, its surface shimmering like heat over asphalt. Harper felt a strange pressure in his chest, as if the air around him had become heavier, and then the object vanished at a speed no instrument on his aircraft could track. Instant. Absolute. Gone. All that remained was silence. Harper steadied his breathing. His wingman whispered something harsh and incredulous. Through the COM. The carrier demanded details. Radar technicians scrambled. Systems rebooted. And above the ocean, 2 pilots remained alone with a sky that had suddenly become much darker, much stranger, much more alive than they had ever believed. Harper didn't sleep that night, or the night after. The official report would later classify the event as a UAP encounter, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Words that said nothing, explained nothing, and comforted no one. But deep down, Harper knew what he saw. Something controlled. Something advanced. Something watching. And this encounter, this brief moment in the sky, was only one piece of a much larger pattern soon to unfold. Harper sat alone in the dimly lit briefing room aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above him, cutting through the ship's constant metallic hum. A stack of forms sat untouched in front of him, each page demanding an explanation he didn't have. His hands remained still, but his mind replayed the encounter like a looping reel of film. He couldn't turn off. Every detail haunted him. The shimmer of the object. The unnatural way it moved, the silent vertical climb. The final burst of speed that defied everything he understood about physics. Harper was a man who believed in data, in instruments, in the laws that governed flight and the machines he trusted with his life. But the thing he had seen in the sky did not respect those laws. It danced around them. His wingman, Lieutenant Mark Delaney, entered the room quietly. He was younger, more talkative, but now his face was pale, his jaw tight. He shut the door behind him with the softest click, as if afraid that sound alone might summon the glowing object back. "You saw it too," Delaney whispered, his voice cracking slightly. Harper didn't answer. He didn't need to. Their silence conveyed what neither could put into words. Admiral Rourke, a tall man with deep lines etched into his face by years at sea, stood across the table, reviewing satellite telemetry and radar logs. His calm demeanor had always been a source of reassurance for the crew. But today there was a tightness around his eyes, a quiet fear he tried to hide. The radar anomaly wasn't a glitch. Rourke said finally, turning a monitor toward them. "We have recorded acceleration beyond Mach 15. No sonic boom. No heat signature. No fuel trail." Delaney swallowed hard. "Sir, aircraft can't do that." Rourke nodded, his expression grim. "Not any aircraft we know of." The room grew colder. The truth hung thick in the air, not spoken, but understood. Harper leaned forward. "Sir, what do we classify this as?" Rourke hesitated. "Unidentified aerial phenomenon." Just like the others. The others, that word sank deep into Harper's gut. He sat upright. "Others, sir?" Rourke exchanged a glance with Commander Lawson, the ship's intelligence officer. Lawson sighed, rubbing his temples as if fighting an invisible weight. "You're not the first crew to report something like this," Lawson said quietly. "Not this week." Harper blinked. "What do you mean?" Rourke clicked through a series of files on the screen. Blurry infrared videos. Radar charts. Audio recordings. Pilot transcripts. All recent. All disturbingly similar. Objects that hovered. Objects that moved without inertia. Objects that paced jets, then vanished at impossible speed. Delaney leaned over, eyes widening as he scanned the dates. "These are all from the Atlantic Fleet. Within the last 10 days. Lawson nodded. "And not only Atlantic. The West Coast, too. Even overseas bases." Harper felt the hairs on his neck rise. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pattern. A presence, one that seemed to be watching from the edges of the sky. Rourke clicked. On the final file of black and white. Infrared video captured by another Super Hornet days earlier. The image showed a small white object rotating, darting left and right with impossible agility. "The gimbal incident," Rourke said softly. "Shot 2 days before your encounter. Same class of object." Harper stared at the screen. The object rotated smoothly, as if aware of being watched. He felt his stomach tighten. "Sir, what are these things?" Rourke exhaled, then spoke with a weight that seemed to press into the room itself. "We don't know." Silence filled the space like a thick fog. "But someone," Rourke continued, "or something, is flying technology we cannot explain." Harper's mind raced. Every pilot knew the sky intimately. The way winds carried, the way storms formed, the signatures of aircraft, of missiles, of drones. They understood threats instinctively, like hunters in an ancient forest. But this was something new. "Are these foreign assets?" Delaney asked, though he already knew the answer. Rourke shook his head. "No nation on Earth has propulsion like this. No nation can violate physics like this. Whatever these objects are, they're not using conventional aerodynamic lift, jets, rotors, or rockets." Lawson added quietly, "Some think the objects are unmanned. Some think they're probes. Others think—" He stopped. Harper looked directly at him. "Think what?" Rourke turned off the monitor. "That they're not from here." The words froze the air. "Not from here." Harper felt the weight of that possibility settle deep into his chest. He wasn't a man drawn to fantasy. He believed in what he could touch, measure, or fly. But what he saw in the sky did not belong to any human aircraft. That much he knew with certainty. The briefing ended, but the tension lingered in the narrow metal corridors of the ship. Sailors whispered. Engineers reviewed sensor logs repeatedly. The ocean outside rolled on blindly. unaware of the fear now spreading across the Roosevelt's deck. Later that night, Harper stood alone on the flight deck, the cold sea wind brushing against his flight suit. The stars above looked the same as always, quiet, indifferent, ancient. But Harper no longer saw them the same way. As he gazed upward, a thought crept into his mind, one that he could not shake. What if the sky wasn't empty? What if humanity had never truly been alone? What if something had been watching, waiting, studying? From the shadows of the ocean, a faint alarm echoed across the deck. Harper turned as flight crews scrambled toward the hangar. A radar technician shouted into a radio, his voice nearly lost in the roaring wind. Another object had appeared. Same speed, same behavior, and this time there were multiple. Harper's blood turned cold. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't coincidence. It was the beginning of something much larger. And whatever was coming had already arrived. The alarms weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. On an aircraft carrier, even a subtle change in tone could trigger a chain reaction of movement, a shift from calm routine to organized chaos. Harper hurried down the metal walkway as the red glow of emergency lights pulsed through the corridor. He passed sailors scrambling toward their stations, mechanics half-dressed in flight deck gear, and radar technicians gripping tablets and clipped reports, their expressions shifting from confusion to fear. As Harper entered the Combat Information Center, the air was thick with urgency. Dozens of screens flashed green and blue, tracking coordinates over the endless ocean. Officers leaned forward over consoles, murmuring updates as their fingers raced across controls. The room felt alive, an organism reacting to an intruder. Lieutenant Ramirez, one of the senior radar operators, looked up with wide eyes as Harper entered. "Commander," she said, sweat beading on her brow. "They're back. 3 contacts this time. Moving at," she stopped, as if the numbers themselves refused to make sense. "At what speed?" Harper pressed. Ramirez swallowed. "We're reading instantaneous acceleration. 0 to hypersonic in less than a second." Harper's heart pounded. "Impossible." "Exactly." Admiral Rourke entered behind him, jaw tight, eyes locked on the radar screens. "Trajectory?" Ramirez pointed. "They're pacing us, keeping distance. They're not approaching, but they're not leaving either." Harper stepped closer, watching as 3 small blips appeared on the radar, each one moving with perfect precision. Identical spacing, identical speed changes. There was no randomness, no mechanical drift, no error. It was coordinated and intelligent. Rourke stood still, his voice low. "They're scanning us." Lawson, the intelligence officer, nodded grimly. They did the same to the Nimitz strike group years ago. Paced their fighters, shadowed them silently, then vanished. Harper clenched his fists. Something cold and unfamiliar spiraled down his spine, a deep instinctual dread that no training could suppress. He didn't fear the objects themselves. He feared their intent. Delaney burst into the room, still adjusting his flight harness. "Sir, are we scrambling jets?" "I'm ready to launch." Rourke lifted a hand. "Stand down, Lieutenant. We don't know what they are or what they want. Provoking them could be catastrophic." Delaney hesitated, then stepped back, jaw tight. Harper stared at the radar, voice quiet. "Sir, they followed us. They came back specifically to us." Rourke didn't answer, but he didn't need to. Everyone in the room felt the reality of it. The objects were not random, not passing through, not misidentified drones. They were tracking the Roosevelt. Ramirez's voice cut sharply through the tension. "New behavior. They're descending rapidly." The room tensed as the blips dropped altitude in perfect unison. 20,000 feet, 15, 10.5, hovering just above the waves. Visual contact? Rourke demanded. Spotters on the hangar deck scrambled to confirm. For several seconds, nothing but static and wind. Then a voice crackled through the speaker system. "This is Deck Watch visual confirmed." 3 bright objects hovering 100 meters above the water. No sound. No wake. The room fell silent. Harper felt time slow, every breath heavy with realization that if these objects were hostile, they could disable the carrier in seconds. If they wanted to observe, they already were. And if they wanted to be seen, then this moment was deliberate. What do they want? Delaney whispered. Nobody answered. Then, without warning, the objects began to move. Not upward. Not outward. Straight down. Ramirez gasped. "They're entering the water, sir. They're submerging." Harper leaned in close to the radar display. The blips descended past sea level, yet the signal didn't vanish. It continued beneath the surface. "Underwater contacts confirmed," Ramirez said, shaking her head. "Tracking at 30 knots, 40, 50. Rourke's eyes widened. "A submersible aircraft." Lawson spoke softly. "Not aircraft. Not submarines. Something else." Harper watched the trajectory line smooth out, the objects now moving in a formation beneath the waves. They didn't slow, didn't struggle against the pressure, didn't react like machines. They moved like creatures of the deep. What if they're not entering our world? Harper said suddenly, "What if they're returning to theirs?" The room went still. Rourke's voice dropped to a whisper. "We need to document everything. Every signal, every maneuver. The Pentagon will demand answers." Harper turned to him. "Sir, are we reporting this as airborne or subsurface?" Rourke stared into the radar display, 3 impossible signatures gliding beneath the ocean like ghosts. "Both," he said. For the first time, both. The radar beeps grew softer as the objects moved farther away then. One by one, they blinked out of existence. No explosion. No distortion. No fade. Simply gone. The room exhaled as one, a wave of disbelief rippling through every sailor and officer present. Harper closed his eyes, letting the moment wash over him. His encounter had not been an isolated event. It had been the first warning. Rourke turned toward him. "Commander Harper," he said quietly, "the world is not ready to know what you saw. But you are. And you need to prepare yourself." Harper opened his eyes, steady once more. "Prepare myself for what, sir?" Rourke hesitated. "For the fact that they may come back," he said. "And next time, it might not be just to observe." Outside, the ocean rolled on beneath the night sky. Indifferent and eternal. But the heavens above had changed. Something had stirred. Something had awakened. And it wasn't done with them yet. For the rest of the night, the USS Theodore Roosevelt moved through the Pacific like a silent steel monolith, its engines humming low beneath the vast, indifferent darkness. Sailors walked the corridors with an unspoken tension in their steps, their voices lowered, their eyes searching the shadows above the open deck. Rumors spread faster than orders, whispers of lights, objects, impossible movements beneath the waves. Even those who hadn't seen the objects directly felt the weight of the encounter. It lingered in the air, in the silence between conversations, in the way every crewman instinctively glanced upward before stepping onto the deck. Harper found himself unable to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that shimmering oval shape hovering in the sky, silent, deliberate, watching. He paced the length of his narrow cabin, the soft creak of the ship's hull echoing around him. His thoughts circled endlessly, trapped between disbelief and duty. By sunrise, he made his way to the flight deck, where the early morning light painted the ocean in hues of silver and gray. The sky was calm, deceptively peaceful, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Harper knew better. He had flown enough missions to recognize when the world had quietly, irrevocably shifted. Admiral Rourke approached from behind, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze steady as he looked out over the horizon. "Couldn't sleep?" Rourke asked. "No, sir. Neither could I." They stood in silence for a moment, the sea breeze brushing past them. Rourke finally spoke. "We've been ordered to send a secure transmission to the Pentagon. Full report. All data. All footage." Harper nodded. "Do you think they'll release it?" Rourke gave a low, humorless laugh. "Not a chance." Harper wasn't surprised. Incidents like these rarely saw daylight. They vanished into classified archives, buried beneath decades of secrecy. But something felt different this time. "Sir," Harper said quietly, "do you think this will happen again?" Rourke's expression hardened. "I think it already is." He motioned for Harper to follow him to the CIC. The room was quieter now. The shock had settled into a heavy stillness. Radar operators sat at their stations, eyes red from long hours but alert, scanning for any anomaly. Ramirez stood and turned to them, pale but composed. "Sir, we've been monitoring the area since last night. No new contacts, but—" She hesitated. Rourke's voice sharpened. "But what?" Ramirez tapped her screen. "Sir, this isn't the only region reporting anomalies. We've intercepted classified communications. Other strike groups across the globe have filed similar encounters. Same objects. Same behavior. Same impossible maneuvers." Harper felt his stomach tighten. "Where?" he asked. Ramirez pulled up a world map. Red dots appeared over the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, the South China Sea, even near remote Arctic waters where no aircraft should be. "This is coordinated," Lawson murmured from behind them. "No random sightings. They're testing boundaries. Or mapping something." Rourke leaned over the map, his eyes narrowing. "Mapping what?" Nobody spoke, but Harper's mind raced dot the world's skies, the world's oceans, military systems, human capabilities. Whatever these things were, they weren't lost or wandering. They were surveying. Delaney entered the CIC, still fastening his flag gloves despite being off duty. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" Rourke nodded. Delaney stepped forward, voice steady. "We need to send aircraft up, patrols, recon. Whatever's out there, it's choosing when and where to show itself. We can't keep waiting." Rourke considered him, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "Lieutenant, you saw what those objects can do. Chasing them would be like chasing shadows. Shadows that can outrun missiles." Delaney lowered his gaze. "I know, sir. But doing nothing feels worse." Harper understood that feeling intimately. The sense of vulnerability, the fear that the sky they had mastered their whole careers now belonged to something else, something far more advanced. Rourke sighed and turned to Harper. "Commander, I want your recommendation. You've encountered them directly. What do you think our next step should be?" Harper looked at the map again, studying the red dots scattered across the oceans, like a constellation drawn by an unseen intelligence. He realized something with sudden clarity. "They aren't attacking," Harper said. "They aren't even approaching our ships aggressively." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "Go on, they're observing, judging reactions, studying patterns. They're learning about us." Delaney frowned. "For what purpose?" Harper exhaled slowly. "We don't know. But if they meant harm, I don't think we'd still be standing here." The room fell silent. Then Lawson spoke, voice trembling with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "What if they're not here to harm us, but to warn us?" Everyone turned to him. "A warning?" Rourke asked. Lawson nodded. "Think about it. They appear near military groups, near the most technologically advanced nations. They hover, They watch. They demonstrate their abilities without attacking. Maybe this isn't reconnaissance. Harper felt his pulse quicken. Then, what is it? Lawson swallowed. A show of power. A reminder. They're showing us what they can do. Harper felt the weight of the room close around him. A show of power. A silent demonstration. A signal, the kind ancient explorers once gave when encountering civilizations far less advanced. Harper's voice dropped. Sir, what if this is the beginning of first contact? Rourke stared at him, unable to dismiss the possibility in the stillness of the CIC. The hum of the radar machines seemed suddenly louder, like a heartbeat echoing through the ship. Commander Harper, Rourke said quietly, if that's true, then everything we know about our place in the universe is about to change. Outside, the sun broke over the horizon, soft, golden, hopeful, but to Harper, it felt like the dawn of something vast and unknown. Something watching, something approaching, something inevitable. For hours, the ship's command center remained locked in a tense quiet, as if every sailor subconsciously sensed that the world they knew was shifting beneath their feet. Harper stood at the center of it all, near the main radar console, feeling the weight of possibilities pressing down on him, the weight of something far larger than military protocol or strategic planning. The possibility of first contact was no longer a distant idea buried in science fiction. It was now a living question pulsing through every corridor of the Roosevelt. By mid-afternoon, the wind had picked up across the Pacific. The ship rose and fell against the steady rhythm of waves, but the rocking did little to calm the restless anxiety brewing among the crew. The rumors had spread. Whatever was out there wasn't human, wasn't earthly, and wasn't following any conventional playbook. Even the most hardened veterans whispered theories in the mess hall, their voices low, eyes drifting toward the portholes as though expecting to see a glowing orb floating above the water. Harper made his way to the lower deck, where engineers worked around the clock on sensor recalibrations. He found Chief Warrant Officer Elena Marquez hunched over a disassembled radar module. Her sleeves rolled up, hands stained with grease. Sir, she said without looking up, if you're here for good news, you're about to be disappointed. Harper managed a faint smile. Just trying to understand what we're dealing with. Marquez wiped her hands on a rag and stood. Her expression was serious, more serious than Harper had ever seen her. Those objects, they weren't just moving fast. They were bending interference patterns. The radar signals didn't bounce off them normally. They behaved like they were absorbing the energy, then releasing it. Like stealth technology? Harper asked. Not any kind I've ever seen. She lowered her voice. It's more like... The air around them was changing. Harper frowned. Changing how? Marquez hesitated. Like the space around them wasn't normal anymore. Her words chilled him. Space changing. Air bending. Objects moving without inertia. These weren't aircraft. They weren't machines. They were something else entirely. Before Harper could respond, the ship-wide intercom crackled to life. All senior officers report to the CIC immediately. Harper exchanged a look with Marquez. Their unspoken fear mirrored in one another's eyes. He sprinted through the metal corridor, boots pounding against steel. When he entered the CIC, Admiral Rourke was already at the center of the room, surrounded by officers whose faces were pale with disbelief. What happened? Harper asked. Ramirez pointed at the radar screen. Sir, you need to see this. 3 new objects had appeared, each at different coordinates across the Pacific, but all moving with identical speeds and vector patterns. And unlike before, they were moving directly toward the Roosevelt. Estimated arrival? Rourke asked. 15 minutes, Ramirez replied. A cold silence filled the room. Harper spoke first. Sir, they've never initiated approach before. Rourke nodded grimly. Which means their intentions are changing. Delaney stepped closer, eyes wide. "Sir, are we under attack?" "No," Harper said quietly. "If they wanted that, we'd already be gone." The radar beeped. A second update flashed. The objects had accelerated, now arriving in 7 minutes. Rourke turned to Harper. "Commander, suit up. If they appear within visual range, you're going up." Harper froze. "Sir Lone? You have experience with them," Rourke said. "And you kept your composure. That matters right now." Harper swallowed, nodding. Delaney stepped forward. "Sir, let me go with him." But Rourke shook his head. One aircraft. Non-aggressive posture. No weapons hot. Delaney clenched his jaw but stood down. Harper hurried to the ready room, pulling on his flight gear with trembling hands. Every buckle snapped with the weight of everything he didn't understand, everything humanity didn't understand. By the time he reached the hangar deck, the jet was already primed. The flight crew moved with rapid precision but avoided meeting Harper's eyes, as if looking at him might acknowledge the fear they all shared. When he climbed into the cockpit, the familiar hum of the system starting up was strangely comforting, like an anchor in a storm of uncertainty. But the comfort didn't last long. "Alpha 2-1, came Rourke's voice through the comm. "Objects are now within 20 miles. Maintain steady course. Do not engage under any circumstances." Harper wiped sweat from his forehead. "Copy that." The jet launched off the deck with a thunderous roar, cutting through the wind as Harper ascended into the open sky. The horizon glowed with the dying amber of late afternoon. The ocean below shimmered like a vast sheet of molten steel. Then, as he reached 10,000 feet, he saw it. Not one. Not 3, but 9. 9 glowing objects arranged in a perfect symmetrical arc, like a celestial gateway, forming above the ocean. They did not drift. They did not tremble. They floated with absolute stillness, each one shimmering with soft white light that pulsed in unison, like a heartbeat from a distant world. Harper's breath caught. Roosevelt. "I have visual contact." The CIC held its breath. "What do they look like?" Rourke asked. Harper's voice became a whisper. "Sir, they're forming a pattern." The 9 objects aligned, slowly shifting into a geometric formation, a shape that seemed almost purposeful, like a symbol made of light. Harper felt something. Not physical, not fear. Something deeper. A sensation like static along his skin, as though the air itself hummed with meaning. And then, one of the objects broke formation and began moving toward him, not fast, not aggressively, but deliberately. "Roosevelt," Harper whispered. "One's approaching my position." Rourke's voice crackled sharply. "Hold your course, Commander. Do not evade unless you feel threatened." The object drew nearer, smooth, silent, impossibly graceful. As it approached, Harper could finally see its structure. It wasn't a craft. It wasn't metal. It wasn't any solid form he recognized. It was like a sphere of translucent plasma, its surface rippling with waves of light. Bending the space around it gently, Harper's pulse hammered. The object stopped, mere meters from his cockpit canopy. Floating, watching, studying. Harper stared into its glowing surface, unable to breathe. And then he heard something, not through the radio, not through sound. Something inside his mind. A faint whisper, a single impression, a sensation of warning. And in that moment, Harper understood something instinctively. This wasn't a threat. It was a message. A message meant for humanity. But before he could speak, before he could move, before the Roosevelt could respond, the objects vanished, all 9. Instantly. Leaving nothing but empty sky. Harper sat frozen in his cockpit, the silence pressing against him like a crushing weight. "Commander Harper, respond. Do you still have visual?" He struggled to find his voice. "There. Gone. Rourke exhaled into the calm. "Return to the ship, Commander." But Harper didn't move, because he knew deep in his bones that the encounter had changed. Everything. The objects had not come to intimidate. They had not come to attack. They had come to warn. Of what? He didn't yet know, but he knew this. Whatever was coming was already on its way. Harper guided the Super Hornet back toward the Roosevelt, though he felt almost detached from his own body. His hands moved out of muscle memory, his training carrying him through the motions. But his mind remained suspended in the cockpit moments ago, staring into that pulsing orb of light. That impossibly intelligent presence. The warning he felt wasn't language. It wasn't sound. It was something older. Something universal. A message that bypassed words and went directly into instinct. Like hearing thunder long before the storm arrives. By the time his wheels touched the deck, the ship crew was already waiting. Technicians, intelligence officers, and Marines surrounded the aircraft the moment the engines powered down. But Harper barely noticed. He climbed out of the cockpit in a haze, boots hitting the metal deck with a hollow clatter. Admiral Rourke was there, eyes burning with questions he could not yet ask in front of others. "Commander Harper," Rourke said sharply. "Inside, now." Harper followed him through the steel corridors, past the hum of generators and the distant thrum of aircraft below deck. The CIC door shut behind them with a metallic thud, sealing off the rest of the world. Rourke spoke first. "What happened up there?" Harper took a long breath. "Sir, it wasn't a hostile action. It wasn't an attack. It came close because it wanted me to see it." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Why? What did it do?" Harper's voice trembled, though he tried to steady it. "Sir, it communicated with me." The room went still. Lawson stood slowly. "Spoken? Telemetry? Lights?" Harper shook his head. "No, nothing physical. More like a feeling. A thought that wasn't mine." "What kind of thought?" Rourke asked. Harper hesitated. The memory was clear, but explaining it felt impossible. "A warning." Rourke's jaw tightened. "Of what?" The ship hummed around them, the ocean rocking beneath, but inside that room the air felt frozen. Harper shook his head. "I don't know. Only that it was urgent. And whatever it is, it's not aimed at us." "Not specifically." Lawson stepped forward. "Meaning?" Harper looked up. "Meaning humanity isn't the center of this story. Something bigger is coming, something they've seen before." Silence swallowed the room whole. Rourke finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Commander Harper, what you're implying," but he didn't finish, because at that exact moment, alarms erupted across the ship. Ramirez burst into the room, breathless. "Sir, you need to see this." They rushed back into the CIC. The main radar screen was filled with signals, erratic, massive atmospheric distortions unlike anything the crew had seen. "Contacts?" Rourke demanded. Ramirez shook her head violently. "No, sir, not aircraft." "Atmospheric anomalies, pressure waves, magnetic fluctuations. And there." Global, the screen shifted, displaying feeds from networked sensors, satellite pings, and classified channels. It wasn't just the Pacific. It was the entire planet. Unidentified anomalies in the stratosphere. Pulses from the upper atmosphere. Disturbances recorded simultaneously across oceans and continents. Harper's breath quickened. "Sir, this is the warning," Lawson whispered. "They weren't showing us their power. They were showing us someone else's." A deep rumble echoed through the hull of the ship, not from the engines, not from the sea, but from something high above the atmosphere. The CIC lights flickered. Screens stuttered. A static pulse washed across the ship like a wave of invisible electricity, making the hairs on their arms rise for one terrifying moment. Every radar simulation, every satellite feed, every tracking program went completely dark. Blackout. Silence. No data. No signals. No sky. Just the void. Then, as suddenly as it went dark, everything returned. But now the radar showed nothing. No anomalies. No pulses. No objects. The planet had gone eerily calm. The crew stood frozen, barely daring to speak. Delaney's voice broke the silence. What does it mean? Harper slowly exhaled, his voice a whisper. It means the warning wasn't about them. He looked up at the trembling radar screen, its green glow reflecting off his eyes. It was about what's coming next. A heavy dread settled into the room, deeper than fear, a knowledge that something vast and unseen had shifted in the world. And whatever it was had shaken even those incomprehensible objects. Rourke straightened his uniform, his voice quiet but commanding. This information goes straight to the Pentagon. No leaks, no speculation, no chaos. Not until we know more. The officers nodded, though the fear behind their eyes said everything. As Harper left the CIC, he paused at the threshold and looked back at the radar one last time. The sweeping line circled calmly now, ignorant of the cosmic tremor that had just passed through the world. He realized in that moment that humanity was standing on the edge of something ancient, something powerful, something it was not prepared to understand. The encounter in the sky was not the event. It was the prologue, a whisper before the fin de that stormed. A message from watchers who feared what they themselves could not stop. Harper stepped into the corridor, the ship humming beneath his feet, and for the first time in his life, the sky above felt impossibly large and terrifyingly small. Whatever was coming was no longer a question. It was a countdown, and it had already begun.